Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to talk about Ethereum. How low can we go? Before we get into it, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out the free Discord at the link in the description below. I'm posting my analysis in there every day. I've been talking about this Ethereum move for a while. I've been talking about this Bitcoin move for a while. I was feeling kind of dumb to start the year for a little bit, but we are dumping. I think people have accepted that the pump was a fake out. And now I think the question on everybody's mind is how low will we go? And to answer that, we're going to start off here on the monthly chart. One of the reasons I've been bearish on Ethereum is simply that all of price for the last couple of months has basically been contained within the November candle range, which you can see right here. Because this candle had such a large range, it's not unreasonable to expect somewhat large moves in the ensuing candles because you've established a lot of volatility within this candle. I think people are looking at the lower time frame moves and thinking about how big they are in absolute terms, but not thinking about them relative to the monthly range. And if we refine the monthly range a little bit to maybe identify the last point where we had some sort of liquidity grab, you could maybe pull the effective range up to this level here around 42.62. You can see some of the interesting respect of the mid-range, all of those good things, right? But because this monthly candle is bearish, so bearish in fact that we left a bearish fair value gap there, which is a sign of some impulsive price movement, because the low here was not swept on the monthly, the low was not swept on the weekly. I believe it was swept on the 3-day. No, not really. We still have this low unswept here, right? So we have a bias of continuation lower, especially because I don't believe that this move down has achieved its final destination. It seems like we are moving towards this monthly order block here. And I would expect price at a minimum to go towards the opening of this bearish monthly order block around 25.26. In reality, 24.86 probably gets tagged at a minimum. So we can kind of think that this is still the draw. We have bearish momentum. There's been no sweep. Having downside continuation makes sense. And you can see that on the move up, as I've been talking about on the live stream, on the Twitter, and the Discord, we left all of these juicy, unswept lows all the way up. And now we basically just have a ton of fuel for a downside move because we've got all of this liquidity that could drive price lower in the form of all of the sell stops of people who got long here on the way up, only to have price reject in this fairly obvious supply area. Now, we shorted ETH over the weekend and on Friday in the Discord around 3,200. Ended up taking some of the trade off over the weekend so that I could party. That was a mistake, but we got back involved around 3,220 on this dump and then caught a nice move today to the lows. I am holding the rest of this trade until at least 26.21 here. I would be extraordinarily surprised if we don't take out this 26.24 low. In reality, I think that the place I would expect price to actually stop if I was a betting man, and I am a betting man, would be this order block. So it makes a lot of sense for me for us to take some sort of liquidity internal to this range here, maybe tag the top of this order blocks, call it 23.15. I'm not holding the entire trade there because, the lower we get, each of these lows could give us a reaction. The risk reward gets progressively worse the closer we are to this target. But I will be taking most of the trade off around this 26.25 low, and looking to leave a runner to 23.17. I would be surprised if this just dumps all the way through this area. I guess nothing really surprises me in crypto anymore, but this would still be surprising because when I look at the monthly chart, I see this big move up and this retrace. This is potentially just the first higher low we're putting in on this move. So until there's some sort of bounce here, like I am expecting a higher low to get put in. Now that might mean we bounce to a lower high and then dump. It may mean that we bounce and sweep the high again and then dump. I don't know, but I do know there's a high probability that price is going to want to put in a significant bounce at least one time here, right? Where I would call off this idea is if we close a monthly candle through 24.86. This would basically just be a full-on bearish change in the state of delivery. So sweep the high and then close through the series of order blocks that took the high. That would be bad. If that happens, we are not going to go back up to anywhere near all-time highs. If that were to happen, if price were to kind of close here, I think you'd probably get a shallow retest, then we just move for this downside liquidity here, and maybe we get some sort of bounce in here, but it wouldn't shock me if we just really took everything out. Like this would be a very, very, very bearish scenario. However, in a scenario as hard as it is to imagine right now with how ugly the market is, in a scenario where we get a sell-off, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is an accumulation range, and kind of pop on our range deviations tool here. So basically, the way I like to trade, I like to look for some sort of accumulation in an area where I could be expecting a reaction from. I like to see a manipulation of one side of the range, and I like to take price to the other side of the range, maybe higher if I think there's a reason to go up. So I'm wondering now if this is going to basically be an accumulation range in here from the high, range low. We have a point of interest to tap into, however you want to draw this out. We've already, we could look back here and basically look to see where our fair value gaps were produced from. So you had one produced from this high here, right, which we mitigated. We can drop down to the weekly and see that this little fractal here produced a strong reaction in the form of a fair value gap. We tagged that, so that's probably not necessarily going to hold us. I'm going to keep dropping down to see if I see anything else. And yeah, I honestly don't see anything until this demand here. That's not to say we can't react somewhere in here and go up, but I would say that it is less likely. And you can see the 30 and the minus 30 here from our range high, our range low. This is the allowable amount we can go outside of the range where it's still considered a deviation that we could kind of come out and back inside of, as opposed to being like a breakdown where we might just get an underside retest and continue. So what I'm wondering is if we dump here, maybe we get a little bounce and then go for these lows, and then we get some sharp sell-off back inside the range, move up, something like that. So a setup like this would be very interesting to me, and I would actually be interested in taking a swing long here. And if we do get that, I think we have a lot of potential upside targets. The range high is going to be a very obvious one. In reality, this little order block here, which produced the November sell-off fair value gap, is probably where price ends up going. This would be a good main target. But if we zoom out even more, kind of pull up the 3-day chart here, if I think about this entire region as a range high, range low, mid-range. You can see how price has basically been respecting this, right? It's rather uncommon for us to just get a single tap of the range high and then completely dump. I'm a little torn on this one because we did get the tap of the range high, and then we did initially have like a little order block here that we broke structure and then kind of immediately balanced out, mitigated, and went down. So it's possible we don't need to come back up here. But this zone here, this 3-day order block around 44.50 or so, this is an interesting target to me if we were to potentially get some sort of accumulation, manipulation, expansion set up. And because of the size of this range, because of the length of the accumulation, because of the magnitude of this range, it would be very, very believable to me that we could get some sort of trade out of this zone that ends up looking something like that. Very healthy swing trade. I would not be looking to take this to all-time highs, although it could do that. And I would be waiting for some sort of setup to form in here. I'm not just, I think you actually could long 33.20 or so. I think you could long this green box and probably get a good bounce trade out of it. But I would not be like holding this and thinking it's going to go all the way up in V reverse. I would long here, sell the bounce, and then wait to see if price gives some sort of range reclaim, some sort of accumulation schematic, some sort of structure break on the lower time frame, anything at all to frame a long idea out of, as opposed to this just being like a bearish retest. But if we do get that, I do very much think we could see 4,400. And this is going to mess people up a lot if it happens, because I also think that Ethereum has a very high probability of going to $880, likely $716. And I think it has a very high chance of doing that this year. That would be quite the yearly candle, but you can already see last year's candle. Like we traded 5K and we traded 1,300 in last year's candle. So trading 4,400 and 1,300 in this year's candle wouldn't be that crazy. Trading 4,400 and 870 in this year's candle be slightly more volatility, but not actually that much more than last year. So as crazy as that idea may sound, I think that's probably what's happening. The way I view the high time frame ETH range, right, is we basically had, I'll pop this on log so it looks a little cleaner, right? So you can see this a little more visibly here. You've got a yearly order block, which actually I didn't even notice. This was the bottom last year. We actually just tapped the high of this yearly order block. Produced this yearly expansion candle. So this is our yearly expansion range right here. We sweep out the high of the range, right? And the other interesting thing here is we have this bearish inside expansion candle. This is known as a mother bar, I believe. I think the guy who made the strat on X came up with this. I don't know. It's a sexy name. But the basic principle for how you trade these is you look for a sweep of the outside, right? And you trade back to the other end of the candle. So the other end of this candle here is 880. We've got the sweep here. And along with the sweep, we've got a market structure break. So this meets all the requirements of basically going back to the low of this range and taking everything out. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because again, when I look here, I see a bunch of just kind of dangling lows, just chilling here, never been swept. Got equal lows here and here. There's a lot of downside liquidity targets. But taking that short to 800 from here is not very good. It makes a lot of sense to short from here down to 23 or so. But the next phase of the trade, I would ideally hope for like a rather large bounce and lower high. And if we get something up here in the 4K region, I mean, that could be like a tremendous, tremendous trade. And at the end of all of this, I would be hoping to buy Ethereum once again after everybody's given up on it, maybe in the sub $500 region here would be a pretty cool price. Actually curious, would that fall into our, yeah, that would fall well into our realm of deviations, I guess, since anything above 0 is technically a deviation from this range. But that wouldn't be like that crazy of an idea, right? Because then the idea is basically like, okay, you've got this high time frame range here. You sweep out the range high, maybe you put in like a double top there, you come in, sweep out the range low into demand, reclaim the range low, and up again we go. So that's basically my high time frame plan for Ethereum, my very high time frame plan for Ethereum, my low time frame plan for Ethereum, all of the contingencies I'm expecting over the next year. When it comes to trading, it is virtually impossible to predict like 3 moves in advance. You know, we typically have some ideas, we have a bias, we think price is going to do a particular thing in a particular area, but ultimately we have to watch price. Where does it go? What does it do when it gets there? What did it leave behind? All of these particular clues. I'm very certain right now that Ethereum is going, you know, sub $2,600. I'm not 100% sure of the path it takes after that, but I explained to you guys a scenario where I would consider a long, and I explained to you a scenario where I would consider a short from up in the range. There's an additional scenario where we could probably consider a short from lower in the range. So I should probably talk about that one as well. We don't necessarily have to come down here and go all the way up here and then down. There's a scenario where we can take this same range here and we could come down and run the low of this range back inside and go up. And we could just sweep something out here and go down that way, right? So you'd basically be looking at range low deviation into demand, but we don't have enough juice pushing up. Maybe we just take out some internal liquidity to this larger supply area, and maybe we dump off of that. But there are very few scenarios, I think, where I want to be looking for shorts inside of this region. I want to be ideally looking for a short above 3650 in a perfect world, you know, well above 4K if it gives that to me for some reason. Again, it's kind of a weird market right now. It looks ugly, looks very ugly. Unclear how ugly it's going to get. Sometimes it's always darkest before the dawn. You know the drill. But yeah, we're bearish for now. I'll keep you guys updated as I see things playing out. If you guys want more stuff from me, be sure to follow me on X. I got the link there in the description below. And if you really want like a lot of my analysis, it's best to join the Magic Lines Discord. That's where I post the volume of my content. Also, we're on Substack. That link is in the description below as well. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully gave you some clarity on what to expect, some game plans. You got any comments, questions, concerns, drop them in the comments below, or, you know, come get me on X, come into the Discord. I'll see you guys in the next video.